I love people, primarily. I love to meet people. I think that everybody has a story. Everybody has a great story. My favorite part of being on the council is that I meet somebody new every day.
Hi, my name is Camille Bartlett, and I am here with Councillor at Large Jon Turco, who is running for re-election. Welcome.
Thank you, Camille.
So, Councillor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name's Jon Turco. I moved to Peabody 23 years ago with my wife, Kimberly. I have two daughters, both who will be in college, will be empty nesters as of this Thursday coming. My youngest will be at BC, my oldest at Bentley University, and it'll just be Kim and I.
That's a transition.
that will be a great transition. We're trying to figure that one out.
I remember doing that myself. So what motivates you to keep running?
I love people, primarily. I love to meet people. I think that everybody has a story. Everybody has a great story. My favorite part of being on the council is that I meet somebody new every day. I initially had started out as the Ward 1 councillor seven and a half years ago. And my objective was to know where everybody lived and to know as many people as I could. And I think I did a good job at that in 4 years. Since then, in my 8th year on the council, the last 4 being at large, the ward itself, my home ward of Ward 1, has turned over a bit. A lot of home sales, a lot of new residents. So I had decided at the beginning of this term that I was going to go back to my roots and try to go back to the door knocking of and finding out where everybody lives and what each individual issue is, not in the neighborhood but on the street, because I think each street has its own separate issue.
What are you hearing?
With regard to the issues?
Yeah, what kinds of issues are people raising with you?
Well, I mean, citywide, the issues are always going to be traffic just because of the location of the city of Peabody. But if I was to break it down onto the street level, the issues it's different on every street, but some may have an issue with enforcement on the bike path over in the Spring Pond area, or over in Ward 5 along the Greenway. Sidewalks, trees are always going to be the big issues. Not the exciting, glorified issues, but yet issues for those streets and those people. I just visited a street in Ward 1 recently, and the woman explained to me that it hadn't been paved in 40 years. Ultimately, the street wasn't in terrible condition, but what it did have is two-inch divots all throughout the street, and she happened to catch one getting out of her vehicle and fell and hurt herself. That's an issue that we may not have, unfortunately that happened, but we may not have been aware of. The street in general looks good except for those small issues. So it's important to speak to residents. Unfortunately, her name was Sharon. I hadn't spoken to Sharon in a few months, but if I had, she would have let me know before she fell that was an issue. So I think it's important to get back to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the work you're doing, right? They say politics is local, and it really is. You're working on the issues that are affecting people's lives more so than the federal government. I mean, it's every single day.
I agree, and I wish more people would see that, that your local elections and your local politicians are the most important ones that you're going to elect, every 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are your biggest strengths and skills that you bring to this position?
Communication, primarily. I think I've built a reputation, as I said, in my 8th year, as somebody that responds to residents, that's out in the public. I'm not able to fix 100% of the issues, but I have a pretty damn good success ratio, and that's because I'll fight for it. Generally, when you're working with city government on tight finances, the initial answer is no, and you need to go beyond the initial answer of no to push to get those things done. And I think most people would attest that my constituent services are beyond reproach.
Is that what you like the most about being a counselor, is your interaction with people?
I do. I think it was the thing that I looked at. It was one of the reasons I ran, was the Mother's Day storm in 2015. I was, my own personal home was flooded, and I had no idea who to reach out to, where to go, what to do. And I thought somebody needs to be a conduit to get this information out to people. And I try to attend as even on the school level school committee meetings, just to create that connection between the school age parents and the parents like ourselves that whose kids are no longer in the school system. So yeah, I think that's the main purpose of this job is to hear the everyday issues. And again, not exciting, but yet issues for those people.
Right. They're important to the people that live here. So no matter how much information gets out there to the public, there are always people that say that they just don't know what's going on. So how can the city and the council do a better job at communicating?
I think it's a great question because we're in an age of overload of communication, and I don't quite understand it because, I put out a post years ago, and it was meant somewhat in jest but somewhat truthful, that there are now I get Facebook messages, I get inbox messages on my Facebook, Instagram, I get emails, I get text messages. My cell phone is public to anybody. It's not a city council cell phone. My kids get messages, walking around the city to relay to me. So I think we've done quite a bit. The robocall system, some people don't like the amount of robocalls, but yet it's the best way to get out to the entire city. The Code Red, the new Peabody app that's online that you've seen. I think we've looked at every option, even to the point of what we learned over COVID with council meetings. Generally, it was either you showed up for the meeting or you had no input. But now with COVID, we're allowing, and we've continued with the Zoom process and emails. A standard email that goes directly to the council, to the city clerk, I should say, to voice your concerns, and we accept those as part of the permanent record. So I think people now understand they don't have to come to City Hall to voice their concerns or support even for issues. To go beyond it, as I said, I'm a believer that we have done quite a bit, and I don't know what more we can do at this point.
There's probably always people that can't be reached, I guess. I do agree with you. I think that the hybrid meetings probably are better for transparency for local government, and I think it allows more people to participate. Some people that couldn't physically leave their home to come down to a meeting. So yeah, I think that's maybe a silver lining that came out of COVID, if there was one.
I mean, it's entirely generational too. I mean, if you look at the older population, they're just now starting to get more into Facebook. I know when Facebook first, became a thing, it was the younger kids, and as my kids would say, my generation and older took it over. And so people, that's their news. That's we have ward groups on those. I'm pretty active. Matter of fact, just prior to entering here, I had answered a few questions on the ward group on Facebook. So I think it's catching. The older generation still may have some issues with computer and internet service, and I think Council Manning's mentioned in the past. Some districts don't have access, and some families don't have the ability to access internet. So that's an issue that we definitely need to address.
I know that the city recently got a grant to study digital equity in the city. They've been meeting here at Peabody TV, so that's a step in the right direction and trying to identify those gaps
It is
in
right.
accessibility. If you could pick an issue to tackle in your next term, what might that be? Or maybe there's something you haven't finished.
When I left Ward 1 and it was less of a, the ward councils generally concentrate mainly on their home wards, obviously. When I went at large, one of my main purposes was to tackle the opioid epidemic. I think, most people in the city I've told, I had 3 siblings overdose and pass away, 3 out of 6 of my siblings. And it was always my goal, more specifically after my oldest brother, who I was closest with, passed a few years back, that I was going to try to bring some more attention to the opioid epidemic locally. And, as I said to the mayor and everybody else that'll listen, the opioid epidemic always seems to take a back seat to something else, whether it be COVID, whether it's justified or not. It gets addressed for a bit and it's headline, and then something else takes place and it goes to the back seat. And I think with the recent opioid settlements in the city, there's an opportunity here. And the mayor's tackled it pretty well with a new department that will address the opioid issue locally. But I, as a councilor, would like to do more. Through discussions with the mayor, we talked about what are sometimes referred to as scholarships through the opioid funds, whereas a local Peabody family may have an issue with a child or a family member, and they can't afford treatment. Yeah. And the city and the mayor have agreed to fund what they call scholarships for those families that reach out to the health department and let them know that they would like a longer term treatment than what the state provides, which is often 10 days. So I plan on over the next 2 years to make that my top priority. And hopefully, again, as I've said in the past, if I can save one or two people, I will consider it a success.
Yeah, Peabody, like a lot of communities, but Peabody for sure got hit really hard. Affected a lot of young people. I know, my son is now in his early 40s, but he could just start rattling off, this one's in jail, this one overdosed, it just affected so many young people. So that's terrific, the work that you're doing. It's so important. And the fact that you can get help for longer than 10 days, because 10 days, it's not gonna.
Yeah, often referred to as the spin dry. Kids go in for 10 days and they come out with the hopes that they'll be clean. But as we all know, there's a lot of aftercare that needs to take place.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any votes you would change that you've made over the years?
I think there's always votes that I question whether they were right or wrong. The jury's still out on some. I wonder about lease properties concerned me a little bit. I voted to lease the school admin building. I don't know if I'd do that again because of the long-term cost, and I do feel like we could have done a better job and possibly put that at the high school or where it's more accessible to parents on a daily basis, or another school building, but likely the high school. That's definitely one that I question. Seems to have worked out decently, but when that lease expires, I would probably reconsider my vote on that and maybe not support re-upping the lease on it. As far as other votes, none that come to mind. You're never going to have 100% agreement on every vote that you take, but I think I've done well listening to the constituency.
What's your favorite thing about the city?
Everything about this city. As a kid that grew up in Revere, and we had some good amenities in Revere, but you come to this city, and I'm so proud that my kids grew up here and that I live here now, because I see, the two bike paths, the Bonfanti Trail and the Greenway, and then I see the skating rink and although that has some financial issues, but the skating rink, the golf course, Peabody Light of all things is a pride and joy of all of Peabody. Brooksby Farm, Tilly's Farm. There's not a lot of cities of this size that could offer that many amenities, and mayor after mayor, they've supported those things. We still have 3 libraries, which is libraries are dwindling and not getting the funding that they once did. We've had mayor after mayor that have supported these things, and one has expanded on the mayor prior to him, and accomplished some great things. So when I talk to others from outside communities, those are the things that I brag about. And I don't think you'll find many cities that can brag about those things.
Yeah. Anything your least favorite thing about the city? Anything you'd like to fix if you could?
Yeah, well, we all share the same traffic concerns, and
It's been an issue since I used to cover council meetings in the 80s, so it's been an issue. So,
and you know what, people in Peabody, those that aren't aware of it need to know that it's every city in town that's facing the same issues. Peabody maybe a bit more because of our location at 128, 95, 114, Route 1.
Cut through to Salem.
Yeah, it's a cut through to Salem, Marblehead, Swampscott. So maybe we face a bit more. What concerns me is the proposed buildings, the approved 40Bs that are down the road. I think that's another big thing that we need to address over the next 2 years. Is a plan for that, as to how we're going to address the sudden influx of construction and new residents within the city. Because obviously new residents add new vehicles, and we don't have the benefit of a subway system. If I had to prioritize as far as infrastructure, I would say that trolley is probably the number one thing that the city needs to do to address the issue. And then some of these housing developments, specifically near the downtown, wouldn't have the need for vehicles, because there is this generation does use public transportation much more. So
Right.
I think it would behoove us to really put some time and effort into that.
Agreed. So where can people find you, Councillor?
I think everybody in the city has my cell phone number, but and I'll say it: 978-335-5709. I'm not ashamed. I live on Linfield Street in Peabody, which happens to be a main drag. Most of Peabody, or South Peabody anyway, sees me in front of the house. My email address is jturco9@msn.com, or I also have a city address, which I don't generally use very much because I just prefer my personal email. I'm available. I return text messages at 6 in the morning till 10 or 11 at night, and that's every night. So our telephone calls, and you won't find very many people that say they couldn't reach me.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to us, and good luck.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.